this is JJ from Once Somerville. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to see you. What you're about to enjoy is some special content created just for you by the Once family. We appreciate the time that the artists have given, and we've put a link to their tip jar in the comments below. We've also put a link there to our GoFundMe. This is one of the ways that we're going to get through this time until we can be open and together again. Art and community are our priorities here at Once. We really miss you, and we can't wait until we can all be back together. Until then, this is our way of holding our community close and continuing to make art. So, before you enjoy the show, a couple of notes. The bathrooms are in the back. On the left, no flash photography, and as always, no crowd surfing. Enjoy. We'll see you soon.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, JJ. How are you?
I'm really glad to see you.
I'm always glad to see you. How are you doing?
Cool. I'm all right. I'm all right. I'm in a very beautiful place right now, and it's really lovely. And it's great to be here, and it's great to be looking at you, and there's a guitar behind you. Are you going to play a little?
No, absolutely not. No, we have agreed upon terms for this event.
Okay.
Yeah, my little magic happens in this room.
Okay. I'm good with that. No problem. Oh boy. Well, I know sort of where to begin, but I'm going to let you begin a little bit sooner than where I would begin. And can we start with a little bit of a setup? This is Joan Anderman. And can you tell us, I know some of your wild, crazy journalist past, but could you give us a little bit of a walk through how you got from, teenagerhood to here?
Wow. Okay. I'm going to give you a very, Reader's Digest version of this. I was born in Los Angeles, born and raised in Los Angeles, and I was a music nut. Really loved music like all teenagers. But, I don't think criticism, especially not music criticism, is anything like a student sees on a list of possible jobs or careers to go into.
Really? Your guidance counselor didn't say.
My guidance counselor never once mentioned this.
Music journalism. I know what you should do.
Yeah, no, and back in those days, in the 80s, there weren't not a lot of women doing it, but I was, long story short, I really was in love with pop music and rock music, and I was also in love with reading and writing. So I was an English major in college at UCLA, UC Berkeley, then UCLA, and then honestly, after I graduated from college, I just said, well, what do I like? I like music and I like writing, so maybe I should write about music. And it was like that dumb and that simple. So I moved up to Seattle after college, where my now husband.
What year was that, Joan Anderman?
Doesn't do that. I moved to Seattle in 1985, and my husband was in graduate school there, and I got myself an internship at the Seattle Weekly, which was a wonderful place to cut my teeth. I mean, as you can imagine, that was an incredibly fertile time in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, and it was a really wonderful place for me to figure out how to do this. And that's where I started, and I've literally not had another job as an adult, except for music critic. I went, from there to San Francisco, and I was having babies, so I freelanced. I wasn't on staff anywhere, and then we came out to Boston in 1996, and I got my job at the Boston Globe. So that's how it went.
I like how you're like, and I got my job at the Boston Globe. And that job at the Boston Globe was?
A job, that plum of a job. It was really, times have changed at newspapers, as we all know. And I feel like I just sort of slipped in under the wire during those glory days when there was still money and you know.
Aren't we so grateful for that? I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then
glad that you slipped under that wire.
For 15 years. You know, I left a few years ago, but it was really fantastic place to work.
And you left of your own volition. You left to make music.
I did. I left. Yes, I left partly because I really wanted to. I wanted to become a musician myself. It was kind of bit of an existential crisis. I also, though, truly felt like I'd kind of reached my shelf life. Like I had just said a lot and written a lot, and listened a lot to other people's music, and you know, it felt like the right time for me to leave. I still work as a journalist. I freelance, and I'm working on a book. But when I left the Globe, I began devoting a lot of time to developing myself as a songwriter and a musician. Yeah, something I really wanted to do before my fleeting time here came to a close.
Can I get you to talk a little bit about your relationship to music as a journalist, as opposed to somebody who's on stage? Yeah,
it's been really fascinating for me. I mean, I think just sort of starting out as a musician at this stage of my life would be accompanied by its own set of, you know, challenges and, you know, also advantages too. But for me specifically, you know, my great challenge has been to kind of deactivate the critical voice inside my head, you know, in terms of creating something myself, because, you know, I've gone from being a so-called expert in the field of music, you know, somebody who's actually paid to you know, at least sound like an authority, to being a beginner and a novice. And it's really easy to shut yourself off, you know, when you start judging yourself and everything that comes out. So I've really learned to compartmentalize, and you know, music brings me a completely different kind of joy now. I mean, I've always loved it, but all those years being a critic, and I think this also factors into why I was ready to leave my job as a critic. Just a lot of the joy was gone from it. You know, because I'd go out to a show and I would just be sort of like thinking, okay, like, what can I say about this? What does that mean? How does this compare to that thing they did 2 albums ago? And, you know, you train your mind saying something, you know, about it for a lot of other people to read. So there's this purity to my relationship with music now. You know, it's not always smooth sailing. You know, it's scary to be on stage and to sort of expose yourself the way you do as a musician. You know, critic gets to hide, which is, I think, one of the things that attracted me to it. You know, it's a very safe, private place to be. You know, don't look at me, I'm going to look at you and tell you what I see. So it's
word
very different. It's very different getting up on stage, but it's been a wonderful experience. I love it now. It was terrifying at first, but I love it now.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I have terrible stage fright, and I'm okay when I do a ladies rock showcase, but that's really about it. And when I'm talking about food, I can stand up and talk about local food and be loud and proud and confident.
Well, you know, I find it's worthwhile to, like, sort of try and drill down into what's frightening me or frightening you when you get up there. Like, you start playing out all these scenarios, like, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's the absolute worst thing that can happen is I'll be bad, or people will think I'm bad, and then it'll be over and everybody will go
Right.
back to their homes. You know, nothing tragic's gonna happen.
Is that a wisdom, what's it called? Wisdom of experience?
Say, wait, what's the question?
Is that, what's it called? The benefit of experience, the benefit of wisdom of experience?
Yeah, experience is a wonderful thing.
It is, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit now about your entree when you first started writing about music. So what was that? Was that really Seattle? What?
That was really Seattle. The first show I covered
Yeah.
was, I think, Joe Ely at that club, you know, Seattle, on 45th Avenue. The Blue Moon. Do you know it?
I don't think so. No, I know Portland, and I know old Seattle a little bit from touring, but not really.
Yeah. So I literally.
What was the capacity?
I don't know. 45, something like that.
What?
So yeah,
what?
It was those.
Say it again.
It was a bar. It was a little bar. You know, one of my early shows I covered Husker Du in the basement of, you know, the food hall at the University of Washington, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then just started covering, you know, bigger and bigger shows for them. As I told you, I did a year-long internship where I typed entertainment listings, you know, so it's kind of like rewriting press releases.
The concert report?
Yeah, exactly.
No, you advanced shows.
Just
right?
literally like announced shows. It was like,
Right.
and so-and-so is such a place. So it wasn't exactly being a critic. It was, you know, getting my foot in the door. But I had,
Sure.
you know, they have some wonderful editors there and they're lovely people and they gave me a chance to write. So, and then they hired me after that year-long internship, after which I, you know, already started freelancing reviews for them. And I just started covering, you know, the big national acts that came through town, the Madonnas and Princes and U2s. And I just, that's what I've done.
Oh, that old thing. The Madonnas and the Princes and the
You know
U2s.
them.
That
Yeah.
kind of genre.
And, you know, once you do a
Hold
job
on.
like
No, wait,
once you
wait.
get a taste for that, it's
The Princes and the U2s. And you were hanging out. And come on. You know you wanna. Who surprised you the most? Who was like, you totally didn't see it coming? They were just so different from what you thought they were going to be. Who? Go.
You mean who I've met personally?
Who did you interview? Who did you get in a room with? The Madonnas, the Princes.
Okay, I've had
these people.
I never interviewed Prince, but yeah, I've interviewed Madonna and I've interviewed Bono and you know, a lot of people. And Madonna I will tell you, Madonna was a surprise to me. She was just terrific, like just so.
Was she great?
She was totally game. You know, you start out with like the list of things from the publicist that you can't talk about, this, that, and the other thing. And then you realize how much the handlers actually manage everything and they don't necessarily reflect how the artist feels. Their concept, how this branding campaign should go. But she was terrific. She was game. You know, there have been people that have been terrible surprises. One of the most traumatic, and I don't throw that word around lightly, one of the most traumatic interviews I ever did was with Sandra Bernhardt. You remember her? She's a comedian.
Yeah.
She was like really abusive to me. Granted, I was very young. It was at the Seattle Weekly, and I'm sure that I was ill prepared and not very smart or savvy. But she was pretty awful to me. She was mocking my questions, and so I kind of got her back a little, just a little teeny tiny bit. I kind of got her back because the story I wrote, I was just mortified. I had, you know, pretty much nothing. So I wrote the story that I had hoped and imagined I might have after talking to her. It was like a total fantasy. And then like 2/3 of the way through the story, I was just like, guess what? This didn't happen because she was in a really shitty mood. and here's what she actually said to me. And I just finished it that way. But it's painful.
Brilliant.
But you get, what is it? The
You
school
know,
of hard knocks. People are just people.
but also if
And
if you're an artist, as an artist, you don't mess with the press the same way if you're at a restaurant, you don't taunt your waiter. Like, you don't really want to provoke that.
But you know what? I think as a rule, that's true. But I think some people, the rules
Life
don't
lesson.
apply because they're just, they play by their own rules and they don't really care that much about, you know, managing their careers in a really, you know, smart or smooth way. They just want to be themselves. They're compelled to be themselves. And, you know, so that's worth something, right? I mean, so, you know, my takeaway basically from all these years of talking to people is that, you know, we revere celebrities. We idolize them and worship them and put them in a different category. I understand that. But people are just people. And I firmly believe that once you get famous, it just sort of amplifies who you always were. Like if you were an asshole and then you get famous, you're just going to be like, you know,
a bigger
even
asshole.
worse.
Yeah.
Even worse. But if you're a pretty good person and you're humble and you have integrity, you're probably, you know, not going to be turned into a toxic person once you get famous. So,
right. But it also, whatever they're doing at the moment, like when they're on their way to fame or whatever they've been doing, it's working for them. So they're also, whoever, like their managers, their handlers are encouraging them to behave in, or maybe not, but whatever they're doing, it's gotten them where they are.
You've worked on that.
Yeah.
Right? Do you just let somebody go? Do you just give them a long leash to behave as they will because, you know, so far so good? I don't know.
I mean, you do. I mean, that's such a complicated question. You, as a business manager, you make decisions based on business. So it's kind of a different, like, I don't know.
Also, the other thing I would say about that is, yeah, you know, you made the point earlier that somebody should be telling this famous person that the press needs to be massaged, or you want, you know, if you want a good,
or just
flattering,
not to shit where you sleep.
But I would say, from my vantage point, I'd rather get the like answers to interview questions, right? Because you get that a lot. Like people who've obviously been coached or, you know, somehow advised about how to present themselves and what to say, that's just boring. So, you know,
Truth.
I'd rather get just the full metal asshole, personally.
Okay. So I'm going to steer clear of the rock stars now, because honestly, I just loved the way that you brushed it off. So I had to go there because it was sweet. And I asked you a question earlier, and I'm going to ask you now because I know you had a chance to think about it a little bit. And that is, what is the furthest you ever traveled for an interview? And what I really care about is why.
Okay, this is, I'm not playing with you here, but this is kind of a complicated answer because the furthest I've ever been for an interview is London, England, but
from here.
From here, yeah, but I didn't go there for an interview. So I was flown. These were the glory days when newspapers had money to fly their writers
the
places
90s.
to cover interesting events. This was actually 2005.
Oh wow!
And I flew to London to cover the Live 8 concert. Do you remember that? It's on the 20th anniversary of Live Aid. Bob Geldof was one of the organizers of it. And this was, they called it Live 8 because it preceded the G8 summit. And, the musicians, the artists had a certain agenda that they wanted to, present. So anyway, the Globe flew me over to just cover this concert. And, so of course I had credentials. You had no interviews planned, or anything like that. I was just going to cover this show. But you're a reporter, you're working the angles, and I'm thinking, how can I get to somebody and get some, get a conversation, maybe get in there something. So a couple years prior to this is a long story. Do you mind? A couple years prior to this, I had done a story about an A&R guy at Interscope Records named Martin Kierszenbaum. And I followed him throughout South by Southwest because I was tired of just writing about showcases at South by Southwest. And I did this diary of an A&R guy. And I followed him around while he was, scouting artists and stuff. This was the year he signed Feist. It was a really great year to be following him. Anyway, Martin and I became friendly, and he happens to be Sting's A&R guy at Interscope. So I get to London and I'm texting, did we have text then? I guess we did. I get in touch with Martin. I'm like, hey, I'm here, I'm covering the show. I know you're here with Sting. If there's any way I could get a few minutes backstage or whatever, get a quote, that would be awesome. I'm just working it the way I do. And he's so great and he's so kind. He's like, Joan, why don't you ride to the venue with us in the car? I'm just like, yes, that's a fantastic idea. So he's like, I'm going to send a car for you. I thought, I'm, totally hitting the jackpot here. This is great. He's going to send a car for me. We are going to meet at Sting's house in London. He's going to take a car from his hotel. I'm going to take the car from my hotel. We meet at Sting's. We're all riding in the car. It's such a good plan. So the car comes to my hotel, takes me to Sting's house, but Martin's not there yet. He had been delayed for some reason and he hadn't told me or anybody. So I'm like, knock, 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 knock. And Trudy, his wife, answers the door. I'm like, hi, I'm Joan Anderman from the Boston Globe, Martin and I, blah, blah, blah. She's so nice. Come in. The kids are running around. There's Sting. There's everybody. And I'm just sort of trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. And Martin's still not arriving. And Sting comes up to me and he says, well, why don't we go upstairs to the library for the interview? And I said, okay, sure, let's go. He thought I was there to interview him. And, it's not the worst situation, but I was sort of freaking out because I had no questions.
You were unprepared.
Yeah. Worse than that is normally you write stories about famous people at a certain point in an album cycle. There's an album coming out or there's a tour about art. But there's nothing happening in this dude's life.
Nothing to drape it around. There's no
artistically right
you could
now.
Write about it for Parenting magazine.
I still have the notebook where I scribbled nothing as I was talking to him because there was never going to be a story. I asked him just random questions about the rainforest, whatever I could think of to ask him about. And it was a pretty horrifying experience. He was lovely, but so I did this interview that never should have been done and never ran in the newspaper. And I hope he never sees this. I'm sure he won't. But that was,
except now someone will send it.
I went for an interview. That's my story.
Hey out there, anyone who knows Sting, be sure to send this, because he probably would really appreciate it and enjoy it. I'm guessing from.
I hope he's not one of those people that looks for every story that's written about him, because he wasn't going to find mine, and I thought I would get in trouble. But everything's cool.
I think he was just an autopilot. He
Yeah,
was just an interview. Probably didn't even check his calendar. He heard the doorbell. He heard Boston Globe. He was like, "Come on, let's do this shit."
It's a little hard to think, to keep your wits about you. I mean, I sort of pride myself on not being starstruck, just temperamentally.
Sure.
But the fact is, you're sitting in a room with, a rock star, and you feel a little weird. It's not normal. It's not like sitting with you and saying, coming up with questions.
I only have really 100%, well, I've had that experience more than once, but not much. But the one time that it really like overwhelmed me to the point where I was non-functional was David Bowie. That was the one that really like floored me. I was working at Virgin. I was working on a marketing project for a record that I could not get into. And I sat in a room and just was like, for the whole meeting.
Imagine. I've never met him, but I can imagine. Yeah.
I didn't meet a lot of famous people, but that one was like, oh, it just knocked me to the ground. Absolutely knocked me out. Oh my God. It was so, yeah. So I'm going to say out there too, I know that there's a few people watching on Facebook and there's a few people watching on YouTube. You can share it if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Don't let us stop you. If you do go to YouTube, please subscribe to the channel because it's really helpful. But the reason I'm saying this really is to say if you have any questions for Joan, now would be a good time to start sending them because I know that there's a lot of interesting things that you've already talked about. Because I keep hearing you say like, well, there's this story, but then there's also another one. So like I kind of heard that with the question about distance, or did I imagine that? What's the furthest you've ever traveled? Did I imagine that there was like a secondary story in there? No.
You know, I've only ever traveled. So I went to Vancouver once. It's, you know, I've never been any place. I went to Vancouver to write a story about the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And that was actually really fascinating because I spent a couple days with them. It was the beginning of I can't remember what tour it was, but what was so interesting to me about spending time with the Red Hot Chili Peppers was how like thoroughly separately they existed and functioned when they weren't on stage. You know, they had four separate tour buses, four separate.
Wow, that bad, huh?
Yes, four separate chefs preparing their food. It was really a fascinating insight.
Wow, they really hated each other. They really wanted to have nothing to do with each other at that point.
I know.
I saw them and I thought I shot them, but I'm not able to find those negatives. But that would have been a little bit earlier. That was the Socks on Their Cocks time, which was like more like in the 80s. I think I really feel like I shot them, but if I did, those negatives are gone, daddy gone. I can't find them. You know, the funny thing is I love this question because I love the why, right? The why. Why did you go? Why did you go to Vancouver? Why didn't you just not go or wait for them to come around? Like why, what was so great about them at that moment? Who sent you? What was happening?
The newspaper sent me. And again, like sort of in those glory days, somebody like me. No, this was from Boston.
Oh, okay.
This is from Boston across the country to do this. You know, you just get a completely different story when you're with a person. You know, you're on the phone and you can get information, but when you travel somewhere and spend time with a person or a band, you have, you know, all your senses are going and you have the visual and you have the conversation and you have the, you know, so many sensibilities, and you get to watch people when they're not kind of on. And that's when the really interesting stuff happens.
Do you know, remember, like, can you, when you're doing this, when you're with them in that moment, you can't be writing down all the time, right? So do you just have a remarkable ability to lock these memories as you're being with them? Or is it a sense? Is it like a body thing?
I have tricks and tools. I try and form, you know, I try and coach myself. I don't have a good memory, but I've trained myself to sort of remember key things. And I also excuse myself to go to the bathroom a lot and I make notes. This is one of the real tricks of the trade, kids. Yeah, go to the bathroom and make notes. Yeah.
So you went to the bathroom before this interview. Were you making notes?
Yeah, but
You
I'm
were,
on the
weren't you?
end of the questions. I don't have to remember any of this.
Your life. You know the answers.
Yeah.
100%. We had this conversation yesterday that had to do with chess.
Chess.
Do you remember that
Yes.
conversation we had yesterday? So I said that I think that there's an op-ed in it, but then I can't remember what it was. Do you remember?
Well, you were using chess as an analogy for, oh God, see, I have a terrible memory.
Specifically, here's the part I remember. I remember that what I've been thinking about this so much, is that game of chess in Alice in Wonderland, which ultimately is referred to in the Jefferson Airplane song, Go Ask Alice, right? So we got to this Go Ask Alice moment.
Yeah.
But I can't remember where we went from there.
Oh God, JJ.
The world is upside down.
Something about playing a game that you think has rules, and you think you're playing by a mutually agreed upon set of rules, but you don't know that there either are no rules or the rules are completely different than you thought they were. And what were we attaching that to? I can't, JJ, I honestly can't remember.
I think that we were talking about boy, well, I mean, everything. We were talking about the state of things at the moment, where we're all being surprised constantly by things that maybe we didn't know existed in our lives.
I don't know if we talked about this yesterday. I don't think we did, but now that I'm thinking about it, you could kind of apply it to the music business, because, you know, I was watching you and Brett talk last week, Brett Milano, another wonderful music writer, and you had asked him, I guess, like, who did you think was going to make it, but they didn't make it, or who did you get through, or something like that. And, you know, I think about, you know, all these talented, worthy musicians in the world who do everything right. You know, they're doing everything they can. They're hard workers. They're creative and imaginative and industrious, and surround themselves with the right people and do everything. There's no rhyme or reason really to who gets anointed or who gets that lucky break. It's just this incredibly mysterious, you know, perfect storm of timing and talent and gatekeepers and this, that, and the other thing, you know. So it is a little bit like a chess game.
You know,
you think you're playing by the rules, but who knows what the fuck the rules really are? I don't know. It kind of feels like our whole world.
Yep. It sure does. It sure does. And you kind of doubly so. And one of the things I've been thinking about is how some of the things that were already so under pressure in the arts, already so under pressure, are now in untenable situations, and there's no real way to make decisions when you're in an impossible situation, and so many people are in impossible situations.
That's right.
So we're all just kind of in this, like, we're frozen. And I was realizing today there was something that I was doing. Now, of course, I won't remember what it was. I don't know. Washing a bag of lettuce. Something that I was doing, and putting out the towel, and like not even thinking, you know, and being like, wow, this actually has become normal. And what does that mean about more change? Because,
and how does a person even contemplate becoming an artist, you know, and dedicating yourself to a life of creative pursuit when there's just so much, there was always uncertainty, and now there's just like almost certain disaster. It's very challenging. Etsy, right.
Look, I got this. Look, it's Marimekko.
Nice.
I like this style a lot for just like out and about. Good elastic size. But you can always make them smaller. And it's one of these, which I like a lot, right? And
Yeah.
it's Marimekko. And if you're from Cambridge, you remember DR, Design Research. And this comes from a woman in Cambridge on Etsy, and she calls herself Pants and Pillows. Marimekko masks. There you go. A plug.
I'm gonna order a mask from her. Good.
I want a sponsorship. Look, it's this kind. So nice for outdoor, you know, light summer. It has come to this, Joan.
I know. Let's float everyone's boat right now.
Yep. I like that you can clash patterns with masks. I have a lot of respect for this.
Thank you.
It's like a piece of jewelry. It's cool. Yeah, boy. I feel like I feel
like I should be interjecting with a question here, and I'm like holding myself back. It's like, oh no, you are not in charge of this conversation, Joan.
Oh, what's the question?
No, but I just
whatever
my mind going. It's like, ask JJ next, but I'm not going to. I'm going to sit here and respond respectfully.
I'm really proud of you. I'm also noticing that Erin dropped the link to the YouTube channel to subscribe and to the Etsy shop, Pants and Pillows, which is all written out, not an ampersand. And she put them in the comments, which is awesome. So if somebody wants something, oh, Addie's son, as I live and breathe, Addie's son has a question. Have you heard Addie's son? Big fan. Hi, Addie. Joan, when did you start playing music yourself? I'm going to break this, Addie. I hope it's okay. I'm going to break this into a couple questions because they're such good questions. When you did start playing, and I think Addie wants to know also, when did you? What inspired you? What was your inspiration?
So I, you know, as a youngster, I knew a few chords on the guitar, like D and G and A, probably C. I don't think I could play any bar chords, but you know, I could play a few folk songs. And so I didn't come at it this time around as a complete novice, just full disclosure. But I certainly had never written a song or picked up an electric guitar or anything like that, which is what I play in my band. So I started after I left the Boston Globe in 2010, and I was very, part of the question was, why did you want to do it? I wanted to do it because I felt like I'd spent my entire life looking at other people do it. I was telling somebody the other day, I felt like a kid with my hands pressed and my face pressed up against the glass of like this beautiful, you know, musical fairyland scene. And, you know, it was in many ways the proper place for me to be on the outside looking in. I enjoyed being a critic for a long time, but then I really began to pine for the more visceral experience. Wanted to do was write songs, but I knew I needed to know how to play guitar to write songs. So that was really my purpose in learning how to play guitar. And I didn't take, you know, that's not true. I took about 4 lessons from Russell Chudnovsky, who's a wonderful local guitarist. Oh, yeah. He plays with a lot of people. Yeah, you know, Russell, he's fantastic. But he was like, you know, he wanted me to do things like scales, and I was just like, no. So I found myself like a more swashbuckling, you know, guru, 2 gurus. I actually found 2 gurus in those early days. My first one was Jen Trinan, who you probably know.
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful musician and also a wonderful writer. And she's become a good friend of mine. And we would started getting together, and she'd show me her tricks on guitar and some stuff. And we'd talk a lot. We just talked a lot about creative process and right brain and left brain and stuff like that. And she really helped me feel comfortable just playing like punky rock guitar. Like you don't have to, I didn't have to be a virtuoso. She sort of opened me up to the idea that I could just be, you know, just scratch at the strings, and that would be cool. And then the other person who helped me a lot with guitar and creative process and songs is a guy named Gary Smith, who's another kind of legendary person, started
Legendary.
Patches, shepherded a lot of the careers of a lot of wonderful people, you know,
Sure.
throwing music and Pixies and Julianne Hatfield, people like that. So he's also a good friend, also a person I met through my work writing stories. So when I set out to do that, I feel like I had some people really helping me and lifting me up and you know, guiding me. So that's what it's been like. Not traditional, you know, becoming a rock musician, but now I've got this band Field Day, and we used to play shows.
I love Field Day.
We play on.
Will Field Day do a version of the theme song except make it Let's Get Critical? Would you do that?
Absolutely.
Great. I meant to ask you. I really want my theme song by Field Day. So I'm going to ask you another question, and I love this. So I'm getting, you know, people are asking questions, which is awesome. Okay. So thank you for letting me interject with kind of a different direction. So this is cool because Scary asked a question that kind of sits on the back of a question that I was going to ask you, which had to do with like the enormous, I'm not going to ask you what's changed in the media, because I know what's changed in the media, but I would still like to ask you kind of in your words, and the way Scary put it is pretty straight up. She said, tell us how the internet killed the newspaper star. Well,
yeah.
Unless you don't want to. Is that too hard?
Well, no, it's just, it's a pretty, I mean, it's very complex, but, you know, I simplify my thinking about it, which is just that, you know, it's kind of follow the money, right? Like,
oh yeah.
The advertisers are no longer advertising in the newspaper because the readers are no longer reading the newspaper. They're getting their news on the internet.
Did coronavirus really put the nail in the print coffin? Because people aren't picking up newspapers, right? Because they can get it online. Why would they touch an extra thing like those boxes on the streets?
I can't answer that. I just know that the newspaper is shrinking. The whole pie is shrinking because something that people used to pay for, now they no longer need to pay for, just like music. So the whole
y'all need to make face masks.
The business model is completely transformed. And you know, when I started at the Boston Globe in I joined the staff in 1998. There were 3 full-time rock music critics at the Boston Globe, and a classical music critic and a jazz critic.
Fantastic, amazing. As it should be in a city like Boston. Boston, amazing, vibrant music scene. Amazing, the best touring bands, the Berkeley, and all of the weirdos.
Yeah, no, there's just no money. There's just no money. That's what happened to the newspaper. And everybody's competing for
bloggers?
a slice of a much smaller pie. And there's more people competing for it. You know, the internet has been this incredible democratizer, right? Like level playing field. This was the utopian dream. Like if you were a musician, you could suddenly have the, you know, the technology to create, you know, pretty damn good sounding music at home. You didn't have to spend $500 a day going to a recording studio. So it's like, oh yeah, everybody can make a record. Everybody can reach their audience. Everybody can put their music out. You don't need the big record label deal. And, you know, it sounds so appealing, but you know, and granted, some people truly are able to create these small sustainable careers. You know, the magic number is 10,000. If you have 10,000 people who are your fans and who will buy your album and
I know that book. I know what book you're referring to. I love that book. The Theory of 10,000 True Fans.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like that many. You know, I know a few bands that really did that. They really did that. That 10,000 True Fans.
But I mean, to me, like, I mean, I'm not the only one who thinks about it this way, but it's really recorded music that has no value anymore, like no monetary value, because there's, you know, a whole generation of people who grew up without being able to conceptualize paying for music, right? Like it was just always all there, out there, free. So how do you replace that that revenue stream from recorded music? That used to be how people made money, and now they can't tour. So after recorded music went into the shitter, people could just like spend 345 days on the road, but now they can't do that.
Because they could sell merch.
Exactly.
So my question is, and I don't know the answer, are they selling merch through the magic of the internet? Because in fact, that would be pretty sustainable. I make up words. What was I doing yesterday? I was analogizing. I think
you were
with the word. I was anomalizing. Not anomaly.
Yeah, but you know what? I think
that was when we got to the chessboard with Alice in Wonderland.
You're at the show, you want your souvenir, and like you're in the moment, and you're like, you get the T-shirt to remember that you were at the show. You know, it's like this whole kind of feedback.
But I think there's this other piece right now that has to do with supporting musicians, that people aren't spending the money on the tickets and they aren't spending the money on the beer, and they're not. So I think, I mean, I know I don't need another T-shirt, and I have bought so many T-shirts. I'm thinking like maybe I'll learn to make quilts, because I bought so many because I'm not like, I have a little bit of money I can put there, and I know that it helps the T-shirt company and the business. I don't know. I think that I don't know. I hope that people are merchandising, make masks.
I will also say, newspapers are trying to offer other, create other revenue streams too, just like musicians are. You know, they're getting into the podcast world. They're doing special live events. Reporters, and the Globe has certainly done a bunch of that, and I think it's been pretty successful. But people, like everybody,
they're doing Zoom interviews.
That's right. People are doing what they can to just get eyeballs and attention, and a few pennies from this really diffuse pot into their pockets. It's a tough time.
Yes. That's what it is for everybody. I had a terrific text conversation with a very nice woman, where she talked very eloquently about how just so many people are in trouble at so many different levels because of the great inequity that we all deal with. More of the chess game with the Red Queen. Right?
I just want to say nothing about newspapers and criticism. Newspapers have their own set of issues. But I also think that criticism in particular has taken a hit, because the way people find out about new music and make their judgment, that's how you found out about music. Like, you turn on the radio or you open the newspaper, and you found out from the critic or the DJ what was happening. But now
100%.
we are not, there's no need for these kind of tastemakers or gatekeepers anymore, because people have their tribes and their friends and their Facebook groups, and it's really one's peers that expose you to new music, or you can just be an industrious music fan and explore on your own and find stuff. So the way art is distributed and judged is so different. There's really, the role of the critic is much diminished, just in the whole art ecosystem now, because of how the distribution channels have been transformed.
Yeah, well, that really was, I mean, it was such a beautifully succinct moment there of how the internet killed the newspaper star. Like, that really is, and and video did kill the radio star. I feel like we've come full circle to MTV a little bit. Like, so we have music videos, and we have some reality, and we have some demos, and It's a little bit Zoom, like come on and zoom, 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 not just the platform. And I feel like we've come around to it now in a funny way where we're back. Do you remember V66? No, you were in California. What was the California version of the alternative, the local alternative to MTV that you didn't have to pay for? You must have had one.
If we did, I wasn't watching it. I was
Well,
watching
I
MTV.
remember it really well because Video Killed the Radio Star was definitely one of the videos that they were playing. And they were playing things like Duran Duran, Hungry Like the Wolf.
Oh yeah.
And songs like that. But it was called V66. And you didn't have to have, what was it back then? Cable? What did you have when you had cable? Was it called?
Must have been cable, right?
Yeah, it was not a thing that everybody had. Because you would go to your friend's house to watch Saturday Night Live.
That's right. Or you would be on the phone watching together with the phone pressed to your ear.
If you had cable. I didn't have cable.
Yeah.
I had to go to my friend's house.
Sorry.
You know. But V66 definitely, because that was public, that was, you know, channel 5 or channel 56. No, it was V66. What am I saying? It was channel 66. V66, and they had VJs. They weren't as, you know, they didn't get stuff maybe quite as quickly as MTV, but they were pretty good. And they had local stuff. They had like Till Tuesday, things like that. It was pretty cool. So I see from the little clock on the upper right hand corner of my screen, I wish I could say it was on the wall, but there's not a lot of walls right now. I'm in the great mighty outdoors with my plants, which I'm excited about. It's been, you know, COVID has been good for the gardens and the dogs. I don't have a dog. You've been walking your dog.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna stop, which I don't want to do because I've had such just a wonderful time. I'm sorry. I can't believe I'm saying it.
We'll keep going another time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, JJ. You can ask me anything.
Joan Anderman, part 1 is what this was. There will definitely be a part 2, and I look forward to it. There will be other things happening. There are things happening all over the place. I hope that I'm sure, you know, we talked about this a little bit, that Once is building some sound stage capability, and we just streamed a few for Artbeat. The city had us record a couple of artists, and it looks great. And we streamed it last night, and we're going to restream it because we got Zoom bombed in a really awful way that I do not want to share with the world. So we're actually going to take down that stream and reload it because it's, you know, pre-recorded, so it's okay. We can do that. And so when it goes back up, I'll push it out. But it was really great. It was New Aura, Mystery, and Grace Giverts. And they were amazing, and it looks great. And now this is a way that Once could actually do a thing, you know, and we'll see.
Good. Well, we are, needless to say, all rooting for Once and doing, you know, there's nothing I and everybody I know wouldn't do to help you guys stay afloat.
Thanks. Go Once Army.
I'm going to rewrite the lyrics. Let's get critical. I'm going to work on those lyrics. Okay.
Do it. I'm going to sign off with you. I love you with all my heart.
Love you.
And I will see you very soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.